Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 39.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today's episode, we're going to spend time talking about divorce and college. There's a whole lot of misinformation out there, and I wanted to clear things up a little bit. We also have a great interview with Sandy Durst, who is an attorney in New Jersey, who will talk a little bit about some of the cases that have been in the headlines in the last year or two because of New Jersey's unique laws. Also, I have a number of great handouts available to you. So I've got the top 10 financial aid mistakes that divorced parents make, which is, again, kind of a quick article on some of the key ideas that you need to understand about mistakes to avoid. Another article about the impact of divorce on college planning. And then finally, I have the 16 college planning questions divorced parents need to discuss. So that's a tool where you can read through the questions and answer them yourself. You can also send those questions to your ex-spouse and have them read them and answer them. And then working together, it can help you guys get on the same page as far as having the college planning discussions and the college finance discussions with your children. So it'd be questions like, what do you expect of your children? In other words, you expect them to work and some of those things. And it's very helpful for parents to be on the same page, so you may need to have a discussion to get on the same page. So all three of those things are available if you go to our website, tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/39, which is for episode 39, which is the episode you're listening to. And there's also show notes with all the great information that Sandy has given us, as well as links to any other information that is pertinent. All right, let's jump into the program. All right, today we're sitting down with Sandy Durst. He's the founding partner of the Durst firm, and it's a law firm that deals with family law and divorce, and that's going to be our topic today. Welcome, Sandy.
Good morning, Brad. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of your podcast here.
All right, well, thanks for coming on. So tell us a little bit more about your law firm and what it is that you do.
Okay. You mentioned that the name of the firm already is the Durst firm, and it's a law firm focused on family law, meaning about 99% of my practice is devoted exclusively to divorce and family law matters here in New Jersey. I've been doing nothing but divorce and family law since 1999, so today's clients benefit from 15 or 16 years of experience in the field, and I think the law has gotten so complicated and so nuanced that that kind of experience and that kind of focus really benefits the clients, because I'm not dealing real estate one day, municipal court one day. It's a focus on family law. We're based in Trenton, New Jersey, and working with clients throughout the state. And 3 years ago, after working at several of the big firms in New Jersey, I went out on my own and we started the Durst firm to really be able to provide a focused, personalized approach to some of the most complex and important issues that people are facing today, and that's divorce and the related issues that come along with that.
All right, well, great. Well, I know that because you're an attorney, you've got a little bit of disclosures and red tape to put out there, as I often do. So why don't we hit that next?
I do. Whenever I hate having to use the time for these, but I do need to let everyone know that I am an attorney. I'm licensed in New Jersey, so any information I give is kind of based in New Jersey law. Please, I hope you find the information we talk about informative and helpful. Don't act on it as legal advice. If the topics we're discussing pertain to you, please seek out an experienced family law attorney in your state and get some individualized guidance and advice.
Absolutely.
With that, I've covered myself.
All right, that's good. If you're curious about my red tape, we'll put it at the end of the show, as we always do. So,
Okay.
Okay, so I guess first thing I want to talk about is I believe there's been a few cases in New Jersey that have interest because they pop up on Huffington Post and Yahoo News and stuff. Kids
Yeah.
suing their parents to help pay for college and that kind of stuff. Can you give us a little background on those cases?
Yeah, New Jersey's kind of been a source for real news and late night talk show jokes on what's really an important issue of sending kids to college and how it's going to be paid for and who's going to pay for it. And there are two cases, same issue but very different in kind of the underlying facts, and I think that's important. The first case was a student by the name of Rachel Caney. Her parents were married, but had a disagreement with the child over how much or if they were going to pay for college. And she, the child, Rachel, sued her parents to compel them to pay. I frankly do not know the outcome of that. It was settled once it kind of got filed in court and got its publicity. It was settled out of court, and that remains confidential. But that case is again important to know that the parents in that case were married, which leads to the second case, and this one is still ongoing. I believe it's up on appeal before the appellate court in New Jersey, where another child, and I always feel a little conflicted using the term child when we're talking about 18 or 19-year-old people who have the wherewithal or the foresight to sue their parents. But it's a student, a child, suing her divorced parents to compel them to pay for college. And the issue in that one is, or the unique aspect of that case is that although they are divorced, mom and dad share a same approach and position, which obviously their daughter does not. In that case, is getting funded by one of the sets of grandparents. So the family dynamic there is strained, to say the least. And the important distinction in those two cases, Brad, at least as far as New Jersey is concerned, is that New Jersey is somewhat unique. I believe there's only four to six other states that can, as part of the divorce process, impose upon the parents to be responsible for their child's college expenses. Whereas in the first case, kind of the intact or still married parents, the court, I think one of the reasons it was settled out of case was because it's pretty clear the court cannot come in and impose upon that family. And that's raised some kind of equal protection and constitutional arguments. Why do we treat, if we're really concerned about the child, why do we treat intact and divorced parents differently? But the takeaway is that if you're getting divorced in New Jersey, whether it's fair or not, or you like it or not, the obligation to pay for college can be imposed upon you if the two of you as the parents with the child can't agree. And this case that's pending right now is going to be helpful in determining what happens or what the court can do, even if the parents agree, the divorced parents agree, and the child doesn't like their position.
Right.
So they're the two cases that have been going through. They've gotten a lot of headlines. Obviously, I'm a lawyer. I enjoy being in court, and I enjoy fighting for my clients' rights. But there's a better way to work these out, and one has to think that the money they've spent with someone like me could probably be used to pay for college and at least narrow the gap a little bit. But they're the two headline-grabbing cases in New Jersey of late.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess just to be clear, on the financial side of things, when we fill out financial aid, it's very common that the financial aid system kind of, definitely looks at parents and considers how much they earn and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of colleges will deny financial aid to a family or give, relatively small amounts. Therefore, there is a big cost to college. I guess the difference is that parents, one safety valve that all parents have is they can just say, I choose not to pay for college. I agree. Maybe you want your kid to go to college, but you just say, sorry, it's not in the cards for our financial situation, and we're not going to pay.
Right. I mean, that's really, the college expense issue has been one that, I've dealt with in some fashion in a large percentage of my cases. And the parents, by and large, the parents who oppose or say they don't want to pay, they're good people. They care about their kid. It's not some malevolent or they're not trying to be mean or deprive their kids. But I think anyone who has kind of followed the trajectory of college expenses over the last 5-10 years, I mean the 20 years since I've been out, they've skyrocketed, and it's really beyond the means of many people, and it's really, the objections are based in feasibility, not desire or lack of desire. And I think that the planning on the more you can plan on the financial side, where you come in, and then the more we can lay out the expectations or kind of the rules of the road in the divorce process, people will have a better idea of where things may fall out down the road. So,
absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, now let's assume that, there's probably 2 or 3 different scenarios out there. And I'll hit the scenarios real quick, and then we'll talk about each one a little bit. But there's the family that's been divorced for a while, and now college is coming up on them, and they may or may not have done much planning. It's not uncommon, I think, for parents of 7 and 5 and 2-year-olds to kind of ignore college when they make their decisions. They're more concerned about where the kids are going to sleep at night and all that kind of stuff, and college gets ignored. But then obviously it comes up later. And then we also have the situation where you're getting divorced in parallel with college, where maybe you have students already in college, or juniors and seniors in high school that are very much looking at college, or both. Okay. And then finally, I guess it would be the situation where you are again you're already divorced or getting divorced very late in the game as well. So let's start with if you have young kids and you're already divorced. What obligations do parents typically have if you have that very vague, or maybe it just is not addressed at all in your agreement? Now that college is rolling along, Well,
I think if it's vague, if it's not addressed in your agreement, that's kind of the Wild West scenario. No one knows, and it's no matter what we may have talked about or planned, if it's not in writing, people forget, people change. So again, in New Jersey, that can be, if the parties can't agree, the court can, if it's brought to the court's attention and one parent is asking for a resolution, the court can impose an obligation. And, the starting point is going to be your property settlement agreement or your marital settlement agreement. They're called different things, but it's the settlement agreement for your divorce. What did the two of you say? How detailed, how planned out is it? And you're absolutely right. With young kids, it's not an immediate need. It's not an immediate concern, and we punt, and we'll deal with it later. And if that's all it says, it doesn't offer much guidance, but you at least then know you're going to be working with whatever the law of your state is. So, you have to go through whatever the factors are and address all of those. If you've been divorced for a while, there's a lot of factors. The controlling case is Newberg versus Arrigo. If anybody wants to go look it up, they can always contact me for the site. But that sets out the factors, and it's really an ability to pay. What's the family's expectations? What was what was the plan? What can we reconstruct about the plan? What's the relationship between the child and the parent against whom the contribution's being sought? Was that parent involved in the process and invited to be part of the college selection process, so he or she could know what the child's thinking and express their positions on who may, what the ability to pay and how they might be able to assist, so that we're not kind of left holding the bag at the last minute.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's another, I guess, challenge in divorce is when I talk with families and attorneys and so forth, well, here's what I see. I do a lot of college planning, obviously, and I get people in my office sometimes at 10 or 15 years after a divorce, and it seems like there's always the parent that's what I call holding the college bag, because they're the ones that want to make it happen. So they're the ones that are doing the work or the visits or the whatever it might be, or maybe they're the primary parent sometimes, and sometimes they're not the primary parent as far as placement and that kind of stuff. But somebody feels it should happen, and they're taking the initiative, and maybe the other spouse isn't as concerned that it happens.
Right.
Now, it sounds like in New Jersey, you actually have some recourse where you can compel the other parent to participate financially. I would say in many states, there is no recourse, because once the student is 18, in a lot of states, and I think some states have very specific rules on the books saying you cannot do it. And then there's some states where they don't have rules one way or the other. It's just, again, left open to the imagination because nothing's been defined.
No. New Jersey's rules are fluid. We don't have an age like 18 that's an automatic termination of a parent's obligation to support. So that there is certainly recourse for the child, or as you've described, the other parent who may be kind of spearheading the college drive. But it's a two-way street. That parent and the child, as I said, have to involve the other parent, as much as that parent wants to be involved. We're not going to let one parent and the child kind of run wild, and then after the fact present the other parent with a bill or a deposit demand for tens of thousands of dollars if that parent has been kind of systematically excluded from the process.
Right. So, and here's another thing for divorced parents to think about. Right or wrong, when we get all the way to, especially when there's a pretty big variance in earning potential of the spouses once the divorce is done, I will have, in lots of cases, I've seen the high earning spouse who's been paying large amounts of child support say things like, well, I've been paying $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, $5,000 a month in child support.
Right.
Where did all that money go? Why wasn't some of that saved for college? And then the other spouse says, I didn't earn that much. I used the child support in supporting the child, and my ex makes lots of money. Why can't they pay? I think they both have a leg to stand on, and they think they need to discuss that earlier on.
I think you need to discuss it. I think, and I hear that too. And also with regards to, an alimony payment. If that high earning spouse is paying child support and paying alimony as well, that comes into play. He or she the recipient should have a heightened ability to pay. And again, it really depends on your state and what your obligations may be. In that situation, in my view, and I think the law in New Jersey is pretty clear, the child support payments are unless you carve out exceptions. I'm paying you $2,000 a month, but $500 of that's you got to earmark toward college, which doesn't happen a lot. The child support payments kind of for the immediate day-to-day need.
Right.
And we can all agree on how much those needs are and what's reasonable, but a New Jersey court would not be receptive to that argument. Your Honor, I've been paying her $3,000 a month. She should have put some of that, and again, being stereotypical, ex-husband paying, wife receiving. I don't mean to be sexist. It just comes out that way. She should be saving that. Because the other issue is, that's an argument to make if we have one kid. But if you have multiple children, we're not going to turn the custodial parent into, an accountant or a CFO creating expense reports. $7 goes to this kid. The alimony is a little different.
Right. And that's the letter of the law. And I think, but there's also that emotional component of.
You're right. You cannot.
If the agreement ignores college completely when you have young kids, then I think you're setting yourselves up for vast misunderstandings, I guess is my point.
I think it needs to be addressed some way.
Right.
You know,
And perhaps
other-
not in writing, because that's the other thing that most attorneys will tell people. You put it in writing and now you're on the hook.
I think it has to be. I mean, in New Jersey, you have to have some form of written settlement agreement to finalize your divorce. The language in that is going to be controlling, but the opposite is not true. The absence of language doesn't make it, a moot point. It can still be raised. So I think, my practice is to address it, one way or another with as much detail kind of or vagueness as the time and circumstances warrant, whether it's, the parties agree they shall do nothing, they shall have no obligation, or, some cases it's so close to that, it's on the cusp of college or they're in college, we spell it out. The child is at so-and-so college, the cost per year are X, mom pays this amount, dad pays this amount, the child is getting loans and grants of so much money, and all that's into the mix. I think leaving it out is a bad practice. Understandable when the kids are young, because as I said, it's not a pressing issue. But if you've gotten divorced when your kids are 5, 6, 7, hopefully you've spent the next decade or so moving on with your life, rebuilding your life, creating new expectations and kind of new financial realities that you don't want to be, kind of caught cold, right, and leave yourself completely at the mercy of the court. You want to be, you want to plan as much as you can given the circumstances, in my view.
Yeah, I would agree. And again, just a couple quick facts for people that, haven't listened to all of my podcasts, but if divorced spouses get remarried, as far as financial aid is concerned, sometimes the new spouse's asset and income are sucked into the financial process. Right. Even if you don't want them to be, and even if you don't think it's fair, that's right, irrelevant. They're going to get sucked in anyway. And even if they're in a trust or you did a premarital agreement or all that kind of stuff, there's a good chance that as you remarry and stuff, you will have to report, especially if you're the primary parent and the kids are with you. If you have a new spouse, their income and their assets are now part of the mix.
And that creates just an emotional and personal dynamic you can't avoid. I mean, the new spouse may really like his or her stepkids. They may be a part of the family, but I don't want my income for any reason disclosed to your ex. And that's a mess. In some case, and you're right, the prenups may not govern agreement. In extreme cases, for a number of reasons, I don't give tax advice. I'm not an accountant, so I can't give tax or financial planning advice. But sometimes it may not make financial sense, but for other reasons, if you get remarried, continuing to file individual returns can help with that. Here's my income tax return. You're not going to get my new wife's information, and that can help. But that exchange is necessary oftentimes, but can really be difficult to work through for a lot of reasons for people.
Right. So let's change gears now. Let's assume that we have kids that are either graduating seniors shortly, so they're going to be going to college soon, so we're in the process, or we already have kids in college. What I tell people is now you have the opportunity to do some planning. I mean, divorce is complex and oftentimes, not a good time to say, well, let's figure out college, but there is a lot of opportunity. As an example, based on how the children are placed, you may be able to choose which spouse is going to fill out financial aid.
Right. I mean, and that can really be a big impact. If there's a parent who is, have the parent with less income fill out the forms.
Right. Well, and in order to do that, though, then that's where the children need to spend. The rule for who fills out the FAFSA is the parent where the student spent the most time in the previous 12 months. Now, there's a whole lot of situations out there where essentially the placement and the custody, and I know there's technical terms for those things, and I don't know the exact details, but they're 50-50. They're saying, we're going to divide it.
Right.
So what you may want to do is say, well, let's figure out who we want to fill out the forms and have the student stay with that parent one day more than the other. And there's an odd number of days in the year anyway, so you give that one extra day. And again, to be clear, what you do on your taxes and what you do on your financial aid and what you do in your divorce documents and rules could be 3 separate rules and guidelines.
Correct.
And they don't necessarily relate with each other. People will say to me all the time, well, I didn't claim my student, therefore whatever. It's like, well, those are tax rules. It has nothing to do with financial aid rules.
Right. Each one of those documents or things can be dealt with correctly, but not similarly. And that's always an interesting, reality to deal with. And I think knowing that, whether it's college or any issue relating to the children, communication, cooperation, and flexibility are really kind of indispensable as you work through your divorce and you work through your issues with your kids, and they pertain, in equal measure to the college expense issue.
Right.
If they're kind of proceeding on parallel tracks, you need to look at what's been done. Do the parties have 529 plans or other savings vehicles? What that's the ideal time, because the court can bring the parties in, the attorneys can get the parties together and say, in the here and now, what were you planning to do? And we're either going to enact that plan if we can, or we're going to put a plan together. And in that situation, it can be an ideal time, as you said, Brad, because we're still dealing with the child support. We're still dealing with alimony. We're still dealing with, equitable distribution. In New Jersey, that's how the assets and liabilities are divided. So, in that, the college then becomes kind of a contemporaneous ingredient into that mix, and we can make it part of the global resolution, rather than dealing with all of those other issues and then trying to fit this new square peg into what you may have already created as your round hole here. So it's a good time to do it, and it also serves the added benefit of kind of, from not a legal issue, but it lets the people refocus on the kids, rather than fighting one another. And I think that's always helpful.
Right. I think the biggest challenge with college planning concurrent with divorce is that there's a lot of attorneys that don't really understand it, and rightly so. I mean, it's a new field. There's not a lot of college planners out there, and I do get drawn into a number of situations where I'm consulting, prior to making the settlements, because there's a lot of decisions that can make a huge difference. So I'll give you a couple quick examples. You mentioned 529s. A lot of attorneys will say, well, 529s, it doesn't really matter who owns them because technically they're a student asset. As far as divorce is concerned, we're just going to take them off the table. We're going to divide everything else, and we're going to leave the college plans alone because they're for college. And typically parents will agree, yeah, that's their college money. We'll just leave it. But what you do need to do is potentially understand that whoever owns those 529s is going to have to report them on the FAFSA. And not just little Johnnies, but little Johnnies, little Susies, and little Marys too, all added together. That can have a big swing on what you end up paying for college, just the 529s.
And to jump in for a second, I think the other thing, if those counts exist, when you're working with your attorney to create your settlement agreement, you need to address how they're going to be used. Is that 529 that, maybe it's only funded through my income during our marriage, but are we going to use that, kind of off the top before we decide what mom and dad are going to pay? Is that going to be used to offset dad's share? All of those things are questions that will certainly be raised later. And then, extending that, sometimes the grandparents set those accounts up, and we have no ability in the divorce to bind third parties to do anything. But, I think that's just another example of what I said. When these accounts exist, how are we going to use them? Be clear in everyone's expectations.
Right. And 529s are one asset that can have a swing on financial aid, but it also would have impact on things like, well, who gets the vacation home compared to who gets the equity in the house, and who gets the cash investments, the mutual funds and the bank accounts compared to who gets the IRAs and the 401ks.
Right.
Because all those things, some of them account for financial aid, some of them do not. So you can have situations where we divide the pot equally. In other words, each spouse gets exactly 50% of the dollar value, where they get no financial aid. And if you divide it, again, as a college planner, we can make a huge swing where you could get tens of thousands of dollars in financial aid.
Right.
The flip side of that coin is college is one issue we're dealing with, but you also have to have the right types of assets and stuff to be able to rebuild your life. You don't want to have, well, I get all the home equity, which I can't spend, and you get all the cash, which you can. May work for college planning, but may not work for paying your bills next month.
And that's and that's kind of the, with college, it's oftentimes, we said before, it's not immediate, and there are, and you know better than I do, Brett, there are other options. The kid can borrow. There are, so if the choice is, for many, Americans today, when colleges are $30,000 to $60,000 a year, any contribution is going to be huge. And if you have multiple kids and you have, mortgages and utility, sometimes it really does become nothing more than prioritizing and having to meet your expenses with what's there. And we can't always, it costs more to run two households than one. And whether it's college or continuing the vacations like they used to do, the new car every 2 or 3 years, we need to prioritize and use the resources kind of for the best and biggest need, I guess, is how I'd say it.
Yeah, correct. I think that's another issue that I see a lot of, where the idea is we're going to pay for college, but one of the spouses is maybe going back to work, or because the kids are older, but all of a sudden, because now you're divorced, well, now both incomes are really needed to run two households instead of having extra cash flow for college.
And I think we can't lose sight of, and I, admittedly, at least here in New Jersey, I don't mean to criticize the courts, but they're a little slow to catch up to modern realities. The economy could have been much, much different when you had your kids, when you started putting these plans in place, versus today, when you're asked to implement some of those plans. I mean, in New Jersey, we have a huge number of our citizens work in the financial industry, and there's at 50 or 55 these days, you're getting let go, and you're getting let go with a 401k that's worth half of what it was, and so the ability, the desire or the intention's still there, but the financial ability just has shifted dramatically, and we can't always do what we wanted to do.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Well, I think let's wrap things up here. But before I let you go, can you give us 3 quick tips that may help parents, relative to their college planning, whether it's stuff we've already talked about or maybe a couple new ideas?
Okay. Well, I think if I haven't said it expressly throughout this interview, I think communication between the two parents, and as the child gets older, involve the child when appropriate, is paramount. I mean, these decisions are so significant for the child, where he or she may be going to school and what that allows them to do in their future. And financially, it's so critical for the parents. Planning, discussion helps. I mean, it's common sense, but if you're involved in the process, it's going to be easier you're going to be more willing to do whatever you can, I think. Address it. If you're in the divorce process, make sure this is addressed as specifically as possible, given your circumstances. Don't leave it to chance. And then I guess the last thing is, if you've been divorced, go back and reread your settlement agreement from time to time. Know if you've set timelines for these discussions to be initiated. Know if you have been required to fund accounts or pay for 529s, or if there's an expectation you're going to pay for college so that you can prepare and meet those obligations. I mean, if you've agreed to do something in your settlement agreement, coming to court 7 or 8 years later and just saying, "Oh, I never did it," may not get you off the hook. So plan, follow through on those plans, and work together. You may have been divorced for a long time, and that's clearly ended the husband-wife relationship. But, as I tell my clients, if you have a child, you're going to continue to be parents for a long, long time. So, act like parents and don't act like ex-spouses.
Yes, absolutely. All right, well, you gave us a bunch of great information. If people want to learn more about you or get in contact with you, do you have websites or emails, or how can people look you up, so to speak?
There's any number of ways people can find me. I do have a website for my firm, and that's www.thedurstfirm.com, and that's DURST. There's divorce-related information there and a blog with some recent developments. The Durst Firm also has a Facebook page. You can find me on Twitter at DivorceLawyerNJ. And you can always email me at Sandy at the Durst Firm if you have questions that relate to your New Jersey divorce and family law matters. I'd be happy to offer any guidance I can.
All right. Well, great. I appreciate you coming out and spending some time with us.
My pleasure.
All that information that he just put out there will be available at our show notes, so you can go to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com and look it up there. So great, Sandy. We may be in touch again sometime in the future, especially if you have another exciting case out there in New Jersey.
Very good. Anything I can do to help and help people through the compound problems of divorce in college, I'll do any time. So don't hesitate to reach out, Brad.
All right. Thank you much.
Thank you.
All right, that wraps things up. As a reminder, show notes are available at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/39. And if you enter an email at that webpage, you're also able to download the 3 different articles I mentioned earlier: the top 10 financial aid mistakes, the impact of divorce on college planning, and the 16 college planning questions divorced parents need to discuss. So all that information is available at the website as well. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns 2 companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.